Welcome everyone. Lindsey, welcome. Thank you so much for being here, being our guest co-host today while Derek
Thank
is off
you.
this week.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we have had lots of conversations about lots of marketing topics, and we're going to cover a few of them today, but really the gist of it is all around the topic of niching. And you and I both talk with advisors all the time about niching, having that clear target audience. And one of the things we always hear is advisors are like, yeah, but when you niche down, aren't you just excluding people?
Right. Yeah, that's the number one thing I hear too is, niching down. It almost has this negative connotation of like you're niching down, you're almost like lowering yourself or something. And it's really not about excluding. And I know we'll talk about that in a little bit here, but it just really helps you focus in on those that you can serve best and who can benefit best from working with you. And when I talk to advisors, most of them know exactly who they want to work with. They are just hesitant to kind of go for it because they don't want to exclude others, but it actually doesn't exclude people.
And that's interesting because most advisors I talk to don't know exactly who they want to work with. They're like, well, I'm
Interesting.
not
Okay.
sure. But I do think it's also that concept of, right, I think they do think, hey, if I get really clear, then I am saying no, potentially to the majority of people that I do work with, right? So like it's this challenging conversation. And so this really came about from one of your fabulous newsletters. Everyone, if you're not connected with Lindsey yet on LinkedIn, I'll share a website at the end. Great newsletter that comes out, like, right, short and sweet, but really thought-provoking stuff. You flipped this entire thing on its head, and your newsletter talked about niching up.
Yes. And like I said, niching down has that kind of negative connotation. And I was like, how can I put a positive spin on this? Because it really is a positive thing. So niching up, I was like, you know what? When you niche down, you are essentially niching up. You are niching up to meet your ideal client where they are. You are niching up to put yourself kind of up above the rest, to be more visible, more searchable, more just appealing to your ideal client. And so to me, I'm like, this really should be called niching up.
Yeah, I like that. Right. It's just that mindset shift. Like, really, it is doing the same thing, but when we just think about it differently. How often are advisors, when they work with clients, right, teaching these financial topics and wrapping, helping clients wrap their head around the emotional aspects of money, right? So often it is a mindset shift with different things. And one of the other things I loved in your newsletter was having actual examples.
Yeah.
Right. And examples outside of the industry, because that's one of the other challenges. We do all get in this bubble and it's like, well, what's that advisor doing? What's that advisor doing? And be like, no, let's look outside.
Yes. And I'm glad you bring that up too, because I love looking outside, like you said, the bubble, because it then kind of helps us reflect better on our own situation without trying to copy what someone else is doing or emulate what someone else is doing in our own field.
Yeah.
The examples I used was a landscaper. And so, for example, if we had a landscape company that helped everyone everywhere across the nation, whether it was businesses or residential, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But then let's say we have, another landscaper who helps with rooftop gardening in New York City. Well, it's like, who do you think is going to get all the rooftop gardening business in New York City? Likely the rooftop landscaper, because they are going to be more searchable in that area. When someone is searching for, hey, I need a landscaper for my rooftop garden, that is going to be more searchable with Google. You're going to be able to find that more easily. Same with social. Like, you just become more searchable. And we live in a world now where we don't have to just rely on those kind of around us. We have the internet now at our disposal. So we can search for the most specific thing and likely find it. And so we are becoming way more specific with what we are searching for.
Yeah. And because we can, it's like, and once you get to that website, then you're like, oh, they get me. Let's say you have no idea what you want to do with your rooftop garden, right? You're like, I just know there's space. I need to do something. If you go to this website specific to rooftop gardens in New York City, and there are all these pictures of like what other people have done, right? Then you're like, oh my gosh, like it opens up your mind and you're like instantly connected with the people, which again, with advisors, if you're working with everyone, when I had my financial planning practice, I didn't want to work with everyone, but I had one of the very first completely virtual monthly subscription practices. So I didn't even have anyone I could refer out to.
Yeah.
So I felt like I had to say yes. And then the challenge was, then I was like, okay, I had to know everything about like VA benefits and stock options and Medicare and Social Security and student loans and mortgages. And I was like, I can't
Yeah.
specialize in every single area.
Right. It makes your job harder, and it makes it so much harder to do everything else, to write emails to those people, to create social media content, to have the messaging on your website. Like, it makes it so much harder to do that because you're like, oh, well, I can't say this because then that leaves out this person, or I can't say this because it doesn't speak to that person. But when you're like, nope, I'm just talking about VA benefits.
Yeah.
You can dig deep and you can explain it all, and you can really help that particular audience.
Yeah. And one of the other examples that you had, it was just kind of right in the same line.
Yeah, yeah. So the all natural organic products, and again, if we keep with the landscaping example, like you're going to have people, like me, I have a garden, for example. So I can't be using a lot of, weed killers and pesticides and those types of things because, I'm eating that stuff and I like to keep it as natural as possible. But so, for example, if someone is looking for a landscaper, maybe they have a lot of pets and they don't want a lot of the weed killers and they don't want a lot of those things, they are going to maybe be searching for the all natural organic kind of landscaping. I don't want the, weed killers. I don't want the fake dyes. I don't want, in the mulch. I don't want all of those things. And for that person, they're likely going to be using those keywords when they search too. They're going to be searching for, I don't know, what would you say, like pesticide free?
Or just even organic, right?
Organic, yeah, they're going to be searching all of that. And again, who's going to pop up? Who's going to win that business?
Yeah.
It's the one who caters to that specific need.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about kind of how advisors can do that. But as always, like the goal of the show is really to kind of show some examples. And so everyone know, like our goal is that you send us examples that we can use. And if you want us to, blur out your logo or any identifying information, happy to do that. Since this is only episode 2, you mocked up some fabulous examples that we'll look at here. So here's sort of an initial example of every advisor's website.
Yes. So this was super easy to make because I'm like, I see this all the time. I see the lighthouses. I see the compasses. I see the generic messaging of helping you reach your financial goals and save for your future. And now as a consumer, right, and I'm looking for an advisor, to me, that's the bare minimum an advisor can do is help me reach my financial goals, right? Help me invest in my future and save for my future. But what else can you do for me? How do I know you're the one that I need to choose versus the 20 other advisors that are saying that exact same thing? Now, if I come across 20 other advisors saying the exact same thing, it kind of creates for the consumer like choice paralysis. That's a psychological fact, that choice paralysis, choice paradox, that when we have too many choices in front of us and there's no clear choice, we won't choose any of them because there is no incentive to choose one or the other. And if we choose this one, well, maybe should we have chosen that one? I don't know. I can't decide. And so you just don't choose any.
Do nothing.
And that's where we talk about, like, when we talk about niching down versus niching up, speaking to everyone, we hear this all the time. It's cliche, but it's true. When you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. And this is exactly why, because when you see the same thing over and over again, you don't know which one to choose. So you choose none.
You don't. One, it even says, helping you. And I'm like, well, who is you? Right?
Yeah, that too.
Are vastly different from my next door neighbor's goals, are vastly different from my mother's goals, and then which financial goals? Like, do you know how to help me? Like, I'm a pilot. We want to buy an airplane, right? Do you know about the aviation industry? Do you know? So like, it's too vague. So here's kind of a different take on that.
Yeah. So then, again, let's say your ideal client is millennials. We know that this advisor is speaking directly to millennials. I'm a millennial. So right away, I already feel more drawn to this one. I already feel more at home. I feel understood immediately. What are millennials always hearing? What's our narrative we're always hearing is we have student debt. We can't afford a home. We're eating too many avocados, right? Too much avocado toast. That's where all our money's going. So we can't afford anything because we're, all of that. So it's kind of like the cliche joke among millennials. So if you want to play into that and this is another way you can niche as well, is just the way you, your characteristics and the way you speak. And, are you more serious or more laid back, more funny, more sarcastic as well? Those are typical ways you can niche as well. But so this kind of plays off of that and makes light of it. Millennials save for retirement and still enjoy your avocado toast. Okay, great. That sounds like me, right? So that is a clear choice for millennials versus the other one.
Well, and we also have to point out, went from blue, which
that too
is a color that I usually love, but like when I see blue on advisor websites, I just want to cry a little bit because it's just too overused, right? It's too much. And again, it's not standing out. And I presented on this for over a decade. I mean, you can find presentations from 10 years ago where I would like pull up 5 advisor websites, right? And they do all look the same and they're all blue and they all just have generic language. And it's inertia. And like, I'm going through this, right now, we want to find a CPA. I just feel like it'd be, we're at a stage in life where I'm like, we should get a CPA. And I've been searching everything and they're all just kind of, I haven't done anything. I've been looking for like 2 months now. And every time I go on, I'm
in the same boat,
right? I don't want to make a decision, not because I can't make a decision, but because none of them are speaking to me, right? They're like, we do taxes and we do this. And I'm like, but for who, like it isn't there. And so I am a perfect example. I'm not taking action.
Right. Exactly. Right. And I think even with our own businesses, that kind of is true as well, because not to get into my whole story now, but like now, I've worked with advisors for years and decided to niche down again, niche up, let's say, working with advisors. And it's so much easier just to speak directly to their, just like we're doing now on this, on this, on this live. It's, it speaks to advisors. We're pointing out specific issues we see with, advisor messaging or advisor, what are their needs and all of that. The person down the street that owns, maybe a dog grooming studio isn't going to be watching this, and that's okay because it's not our ideal client.
Yes, exactly. So when we think about like, okay, if advisors sitting here watching this, they're like, all right, well, how can I think about this, right? If they don't want to get as specific as like, millennials or stereotypes of millennials,
right?
Walk us through kind of what's one of those exercises you do with advisors.
Yeah. So because the first thing I often hear is when people think niching down, they think it has to be a very specific demographic. It has to be a very specific, like we said, millennials, something like that. But it really doesn't have to be. There can be lots of different ways that you can niche down. And the first question that I present to advisors is to reflect on their own, themselves. Why are you in this business? Why did you get into the business? Why are you passionate about helping people in this way? People don't just start their businesses on a whim. People typically start their business because they're passionate about something. Typically, I hear when I ask this question, it goes back to the childhood. It goes back to, well, I saw my parents struggle, or I saw them work so hard and retire, and then they couldn't enjoy retirement. Or, there's some story there linked there. And then that is typically who they want to help. They want to help others not end up in that situation. Another example is I have a client who at the age of 40 went through widowhood. That was a huge life transition for her. So now she helps others go through major life transitions. And so it's a reflection of her. So that is my first step. If you're struggling to niche up, I will say, if you're struggling to niche up, if you're struggling to find that sweet spot that you really enjoy, is to look inward, really. Look at what your values are, what you're passionate about, how you enjoy working, who do you enjoy working with. You can also look at your existing clientele as well. Who do you enjoy working with the most? Who do you kind of get excited to talk to and work with? And what are they going through that you enjoy helping them get through, and that sort of thing?
Yeah. And even if we just take it like just from the characteristics, right? Even if they're like, hey, I don't want to focus even on something like widowhood, right? So on my homepage of my website, advisorvm.com, I actually have a little video right there. And I say in this like 28-second video where if you have conversations on speakerphone in public, if you leave public restrooms worse than you found them, and if you drive slowly in the left lane, I don't want to work with you.
Oh, that's good.
So like, I just say that flat out. And I have a rule where I will only work with people that I would invite to a barbecue. which is
Yeah.
my way of being like, would you get along with other people? That doesn't mean you need to be an extrovert. You can be an introvert, like that welcomes all kinds of people, right? But like, would you show up? Are you going to be rude and inconsiderate and ungrateful,
Yeah.
right? If that's who you
Yeah.
are, like to me, that's my first line criteria.
I
And
love
of course,
that.
being advisors, but so that's another way of thinking it, right? If you're just like, what
Right.
are the characteristics of people that
Mhm.
you don't want to work with?
Yeah, yeah, because it's very true. Birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's why we have certain people who are our friends and certain, there's just it's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that can all come into play with your niche and your messaging and how you write an email can really tell a lot about, your personality, and people are attracted to that.
Yeah. So then
Mhm.
wrapping up here, we're already kind of going a little bit over time. Just
Mhm.
final thought here as we're thinking about messaging and kind of having that niche up demographic,
Yeah.
making sure your messaging is consistent across all your platforms.
Everywhere. Yes. Because as we said, people are now, and for a long time now, people have been using the internet to search everything. And they're not just searching once and done. They're doing the research. They're looking at your website. They're looking at social media. They're looking at everything. And if it's inconsistent, you don't want them to kind of fall off. You don't want them to be really interested and then all of a sudden fall off because something maybe didn't speak to them. So or maybe they'll find you first in the place that you didn't update your messaging and think they're not a fit. So just go ahead and make sure all of that, once you figure out who that ideal client is and that niche market is, make sure that you are speaking to them across all of those channels. Yeah. So niching up to make sure they can find you.
Yeah. And keeping it simple is the last thing I would say with that, because I see a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of advisors. I talk with a lot of advisors that like have a different brand for their YouTube channel and a different brand for their podcast and a different brand for a
Yeah.
Facebook group. And again, think about the client journey, like put yourself in the actual shoes of your ideal prospect. And to your point, right, if they find you in one place and then it takes them to a website that says something completely different, right, or
You have
has
to
a
be like,
totally
huh?
different
Yeah.
brand, right? I'd
Mhm.
be like, oh, was that a fake profile then? Like, where am I going? I don't know what's
Yeah. Is
happening.
this
And
the same
again,
person?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So simplicity for the
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Fabulous. Lindsey, I know we could talk forever. We'll
Oh,
definitely
we
have
could.
you on again because there is so much more we need to cover. But again, if you're
Yes.
not yet following her, connected on LinkedIn, subscribe to her newsletter.
Thank you.
You've been fabulous. Thank you so much for
Thank
everything
you
that
so much, Katie. I
you're doing.
appreciate it.
Yeah, this was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.